Okay, I'm Ansar. I was brought up in Germany. I'm the daughter of a communist from Iraq and of a really big-hearted women from Germany. And I think this has given me a lot to broaden my view on the world and to be able, as someone with a little south in herself, to become politically aware in the north.
And what's your involvement with Syria?
My involvement in Syria is or started quite simply. I think when we have the chance to see that people do an uprising against a really brutal dictatorship that has ruled the country in a quite totalitarian way in terms of having secret detentions, in terms of having mass killings within these detention centers, then it's quite obvious when we hear that people rise up against such a dictatorship that we try to stand with them, especially from our really privileged position, and especially as we know that governments all over the world actually usually strengthen these dictators, because for them and also for global capitalism it's really easy when they have a dictator in a country in place and they just need to talk to this dictator instead of talking to the people. So it's clear that we as people have to stand with these other people and actually try to cross through the lines. So when governments stand together, automatically people have to stand together.
And so what precisely do you do? Are you part of civil society networks working on Syria, or in some other way, what is your involvement?
So the involvement started basically by trying to make people aware in Germany that there is an uprising that is led by people, that it's not a conspiracy. Because I think part of the power structure is that people try to disqualify people-led movements by saying, it's a conspiracy that was triggered from outside. So it was really important to tell people that it's not the case. And this is also how me and other people got to know more and more activists inside of Syria, and we constantly had to learn from them. So they were constantly confronted with different realities. First, it was showing their refusal of the government by making demonstrations. Then they were confronted with war and with the withdrawal of state structures, so they had to self-organize. And then they were confronted with political starvation, which meant that the government and its allies had put sieges on cities and rural spaces to actually force people into submission. So what could we do besides talking about this and making this reality visible was to think how we can share the knowledge we have on food production in these circumstances, because not everyone was able to do food production in a besieged city. It's nothing that you simply can come up with. So we tried to bring together people that have this knowledge, so people that work with their hands, with these people in Syria that had to, in a really fast manner, to gain these skills. And then, quite organically, this developed into a network from people within Syria, where also these besieged city people became more and more aware, actually, of the question of food security, and more importantly, of food sovereignty. And they adopted this as their own cause within this political revolution. And they set up a network that we then could be in solidarity with.
That's great. So do you think that this kind of food sovereignty sort of movement, so to speak, or network in Syria could also become the sort of a seed for some kind of an alternative peace building process in a very difficult situation, of course?
I think this depends on how we can envision peace. So I think for the farmer that has in some way now the chance to self-determine how to do farming and actually finally be in peace with the soil and the way he or she produces food. I think this is the kind of peace. We have to consider that previously the agriculture system in Syria was really centralized. So the government envisioned the idea of having complete food security and of exporting wheat and cotton. And this is why it enforced a certain agricultural policy on the farmers. Which also implied that they had to use chemicals, that they had to use mineral fertilizers and so on. So being not forced to do that anymore, farmers could be in their little in the places where they were, when they were not forced to leave by aerial bombing, at least they could, through practice, already develop an alternative. But of course I think it's really difficult because Syrians are in such a vulnerable position. So when for example now Syrian farmers are replanting after years the really old Syrian kinds of wheat, for example, and then a military campaign starts against their areas, it's really difficult for them to sustain this. And often the seeds, so also the seed of peace and hope, becomes like a human family member that they really want to secure, that they want to take with themselves. But the very act of doing agriculture demands a certain stability. It's nothing you can do within a week or a month.
Okay. So, anything else that you want to add?
Anything else I want to add? I think, so me as someone that was not active at all in agriculture, and that had probably the idea that I can understand things from above, this was completely crushed by the work with the people in the network. So I'm just really thankful for this, and at least me, I try to share these experiences with others, because we really also, as activists, have to stop to think that we know how it works, and really try through practice, so like through farming or other professions we might have, to understand the world completely in a new way. And this is also what really opens up solidarity beyond borders, which will always, unfortunately, torn us apart.
Thank you.
Thank you.